I never thought I'd be the guy telling this story. We've been married 7 years, together for 10, the kind of couple people pointed at and said, they're solid. No screaming fights, no dramatic breakups, no cheating rumors, at least none that I knew of. We had routines, coffee together every morning, dumb inside jokes, a shared calendar on the fridge. I genuinely believed we were fine. Then little things started feeling off. Not dramatic enough to accuse her of anything, just enough to make my stomach tighten. She became sharp with me over nothing, snapping when I asked how her day was, rolling her eyes like my presence annoyed her. She guarded her phone like it was a state secret. If I walked into a room, the screen would flip down instantly. Password changed. Notifications silenced. She started working late 2 or 3 times a week, but her paycheck didn't change. New clothes showed up, nicer underwear I never saw her wear for me. When I mentioned it, she laughed and said I was being paranoid, that married people get boring if they don't try to look good. The way she said it made me feel stupid for even asking. I told myself it was stress. Or a phase. Or me overthinking things because I'd gained some weight and was insecure. I wanted to believe that. Looking back, that was the moment I should have trusted my gut instead of trying to be the reasonable husband. The first real crack came on a random Tuesday. I came home early because a meeting got cancelled, and I remember feeling weirdly excited to surprise her. I even picked up takeout from her favorite place. When I walked in, the apartment was quiet, too quiet. Her car wasn't in the driveway. No big deal, I thought. Late again. Then her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She'd forgotten it, which never happened. Ever. My heart started racing before I even touched it. The screen lit up with a message preview from a name I didn't recognize, already miss you. When can we do this again? I didn't open it. I just stared at that one sentence like it was written in a different language. My brain immediately tried to explain it away. Maybe it was a friend. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe I was about to ruin my marriage by jumping to conclusions. But the pit in my stomach told me something had shifted. I put the phone back exactly where it was, untouched, like it might explode if I did more. I sat there with the food getting cold, replaying every weird moment from the last few months. Suddenly, all those little things lined up into something I didn't want to see. When she finally came home, cheerful and overly affectionate, kissing my cheek like nothing was wrong, I realized this wasn't just in my head anymore. Something had broken. I just didn't know how bad it was yet. That night, I barely slept. She curled up next to me like always, breathing slow and calm, while my mind ran in circles. I kept hearing that message in my head, over and over. Already miss you. Not something you casually text a coworker. Not something you accidentally send. The next day, I started noticing everything. Like I'd unlocked some cursed level of awareness. She took her phone into the bathroom to shower. She angled her body away from me when texting. When I asked who she was talking to, she snapped, "Why do you always need to know?" Which was new. I'd never needed to know before. I checked our shared credit card statement during lunch. 2 charges stood out. A hotel bar across town. Twice. Same week. She had told me she was at a work conference both nights. I remember sitting there staring at the screen, my hands actually shaking, thinking how surreal it was that my marriage might be unraveling over a PDF. That evening, I casually asked how the conference was. She didn't hesitate. Named people. Described sessions. Complained about the coffee. The ease of the lie scared me more than the lie itself. It was smooth. Practiced. By the time I went to bed, I wasn't looking for proof anymore. I was bracing myself for it. 2 days later, everything came crashing down fast. She left her laptop open on the couch while she ran to the store. I wasn't snooping at first, I swear that's true. I just went to close it, and a message window was already up. It wasn't subtle. Not flirty. Not ambiguous. Full-on intimate. Plans. Inside jokes. Complaints about me. The way she talked about our marriage like it was a burden she'd been dragging around. He called her baby. She told him she felt alive with him. I felt my ears ringing. My hands went numb. I scrolled even though every part of me was screaming to stop. I saw timestamps lining up perfectly with her late nights, her conferences, her sudden mood swings. There were photos too nothing explicit, but close enough to make me feel sick. Then the front door opened. I barely had time to process before she walked in, saw me frozen on the couch with her laptop, and her face drained of color. For a split second, we just stared at each other. No words. No excuses yet. Just the silent acknowledgement that the truth was finally out, and there was no putting it back. She recovered fast. Too fast. Her shock turned into anger in seconds, like I was the one who'd crossed a line. She demanded to know why I was on her laptop, accused me of invading her privacy, said I had no right. I remember thinking how surreal it was, my marriage was burning down and she was mad about boundaries. Then the lies started stacking. She said it was just flirting. Said it was harmless. Said nothing physical had happened. Each sentence contradicted the messages I just read, but she said them with confidence, like if she spoke fast enough, I'd doubt my own eyes. When I pointed out specific lines, she shrugged and said I was taking them out of context. I asked who he was. She rolled her eyes and said, a friend. Then a coworker. Then someone who understands me. Every version shifted slightly, like she was testing which one I'd accept. When I asked about the hotel charges, she actually laughed, and said I was being dramatic, that coworkers sometimes grab drinks. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. My chest hurt. My mouth went dry. I kept waiting for her to break down, to apologize, to show some sign of guilt. Instead, she crossed her arms and looked bored, like this conversation was an inconvenience. That was the moment I realized this wasn't going to be a simple confession followed by tears. This was going to be a fight for the truth, and she was perfectly comfortable lying straight to my face. I don't know if it was exhaustion or overconfidence, but eventually her story cracked. I asked one small question, something insignificant about a date, and she hesitated. Just half a second too long. Then she answered, and it didn't match what she'd said earlier. I called it out calmly, which surprised even me. That's when she exploded. She said I was interrogating her, that I was controlling, that this was why she felt trapped in our marriage. Somehow, her cheating turned into my fault in under a minute. It was like watching someone rewrite history in real time. Then, in the middle of yelling, she let it slip. She said, it didn't mean anything, it was just sex. The room went dead quiet. She froze. I froze. There it was, no room for interpretation, no walking it back. She tried to recover immediately, said she didn't mean it like that, said I'd misunderstood. But it was too late. The mask had slipped, and I finally had the truth I'd been dreading. Months. Not weeks. Not a mistake. Months of lying, sneaking around, coming home to me like nothing happened. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just sat there, feeling something heavy settle in my chest. Like the version of my life I believed in had officially ended, and there was no argument left that could save it. Once the truth was out, she shifted tactics. The anger cooled, replaced by this cold, calculated tone that scared me more than the yelling. She said she wouldn't have cheated if I'd been more attentive. If I'd noticed her sooner. If I hadn't checked out emotionally, news to me, considering I'd been the one asking what was wrong for months. She brought up old fights, tiny things from years ago, dragging them into the present like evidence in a trial. I didn't plan dates enough. I worked too much. I wasn't ambitious like him. Every flaw she could think of was suddenly the reason she ended up in someone else's bed. I started questioning myself despite everything. That's the messed up part. When someone you love confidently tells you that you drove them to cheat, it messes with your head. I remember apologizing at one point, and then immediately hating myself for it. When I asked if she felt guilty at all, she shrugged and said she hadn't planned to hurt me. Like that somehow made it better. She said she deserved to be happy. That life was short. That I should understand. That was when the anger finally hit me, not explosive, but sharp and clear. I realized she wasn't sorry she cheated. She was sorry she got caught. The days after felt unreal, like I was walking through someone else's life. We slept in separate rooms without officially agreeing to it. She acted oddly normal, chatty, even upbeat, while I barely functioned. I went to work and stared at my screen for hours, reading the same sentence over and over. At night, everything crashed in. I'd replay conversations, her lies, the way she came home smelling like his cologne, and I never questioned it. I'd feel fine for 10 minutes, then suddenly my chest would tighten and I'd have to sit down, like grief hitting in waves. She kept pushing foreclosure talks. Said we needed to communicate. But every conversation somehow turned into her explaining why this affair made sense. She minimized it constantly, said it wasn't love, just an escape, like that distinction mattered. When I asked if she'd stop seeing him, she said she needed time to process her feelings. That answer alone told me everything. I wasn't her priority anymore. I was an obstacle in the middle of a decision she was still actively making. And knowing that hurt more than the initial discovery ever did. Against my better judgment, I tried to be the rational one. I suggested counseling. I said we didn't have to decide anything immediately, just slow things down and figure out whether our marriage was salvageable. Part of me still clung to the version of her I married, like maybe that woman would suddenly reappear. She agreed, sort of. Said therapy could be useful, but only if it wasn't about blaming her. She also made it clear she wouldn't cut him off yet because she didn't like ultimatums. Hearing that felt like a punch to the gut. She wanted to work on us while keeping the affair on standby. I found myself over-explaining my feelings, choosing words carefully so she wouldn't get defensive, like I was negotiating with someone who held all the power. Meanwhile, she went out more. Stayed out later. Claimed she was clearing her head. One night, she didn't come home at all. Texted me at 3 a.m. saying her phone died and she crashed at a friend's place. I didn't even ask which friend. I already knew. That was the night something inside me finally started to detach. Not heal, detach. Like my mind was quietly preparing for a life without her, even if my heart wasn't ready yet. The breaking point didn't come during a screaming match or some dramatic revelation. It came quietly, over breakfast. She was scrolling on her phone, smiling to herself, while I sat across from her feeling invisible in my own kitchen. I asked her, one last time, if she was still seeing him. She didn't look up. Just said, I told you, I don't like being controlled. That was it. No denial. No reassurance. Just deflection. Something snapped, not in an explosive way, but like a clean cut. I realized I was fighting for a marriage she'd already mentally left. Every compromise I made just made me smaller. Every conversation left me feeling like I had to justify why being cheated on hurt. I told her I couldn't live like this. That I needed honesty and basic respect, or we were done. She finally looked at me then, annoyed more than anything, and said maybe we'd grown into different people. Said maybe this was inevitable. Hearing her reduce years of shared life to inevitability was brutal. But it also gave me clarity. I wasn't losing something stable. I was clinging to something that no longer existed. That morning, I started planning my exit, even though saying it out loud still terrified me. After that morning, everything hit me at once. I went into work but couldn't focus. Every laugh, every small interaction, felt surreal, like I was behind a glass wall, watching life happen to someone else. At night, I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying moments I'd taken for granted, her smile, her hand in mine, the quiet evenings I thought meant love. Anger and sadness collided. I'd feel furious, imagining them together, then crushed with guilt for even thinking about leaving, wondering if I could have done more to save us. Friends called to check in. I forced small smiles, joked about stress at work, but inside I was unraveling. Sleep came in short, fitful bursts, and nightmares replaced dreams. One night, I woke up convinced I'd walked into the wrong apartment. Everything felt wrong, familiar yet foreign. The betrayal didn't just touch our relationship, it poisoned the sense of safety I'd always had at home. By the end of the week, I realized I couldn't continue pretending I was okay. The grief was too heavy, and staying in the same space as her without some distance was like keeping a knife in my chest. I needed space, not to be dramatic, but to survive. I told her I needed time apart. She didn't argue much, just raised an eyebrow and said, "Fine, go do whatever makes you happy." The indifference stung more than anger ever could. Packing a bag felt surreal, like I was leaving not just her, but the life I thought I had. I moved into a small Airbnb nearby. Just a bed, a desk, and 4 bare walls. No reminders. No smell of her shampoo, no lingering clothes in the closet, no laughter echoing through the apartment. For the first time in months, I could breathe without immediately bracing for disappointment. The first night alone was brutal. Silence hit me like a wave. I felt every pang of betrayal, every moment I'd overlooked, every lie stacked in my memory. But in that silence, I also felt the faintest trace of clarity. I was no longer negotiating for scraps of honesty from someone who had already chosen differently. I started writing down everything I felt: anger, sorrow, confusion, even fleeting relief. I didn't want to forget a single detail. Not to obsess, but to process. Slowly, the haze began to lift, and I realized I could survive this. Not yet whole, but no longer trapped. After a few weeks apart, I knew I needed closure. Not with therapy, not with endless what-if conversations, but with a clear, honest confrontation. I asked her to meet at a quiet cafe, neutral ground. She showed up late, coffee in hand, looking the same yet completely different, the casual arrogance, the smirk I used to find charming, now infuriating. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just spoke slowly, deliberately, saying everything I needed her to hear, that I knew the truth, that the betrayal had cut me deeply, and that I could no longer ignore it. I watched her shift uncomfortably, realizing the mask she wore so effortlessly at home didn't work here. She tried the excuses again, blaming stress, claiming it was just a fling, but her words felt hollow, empty, and even she seemed aware of it. I stopped her mid-sentence, telling her I didn't want reasons or apologies. I wanted acknowledgement, and finally, she said it: she had chosen someone else, and it was over between us. No sugarcoating, no blaming me. Hearing it aloud hurt, but it also felt like stepping out of a nightmare. I left the cafe with a mix of anger, sadness, and relief. The tangled mess was finally untangled, and the weight on my chest lightened just enough to start breathing again. The weeks after that were strange. The apartment felt impossibly quiet when I returned, empty spaces echoing memories I couldn't unhear. I went through our things, packed away reminders, and realized how much of my life had revolved around someone who no longer cared the same way. It hurt like hell, but it also made room for me to think about me again. I started small. Morning runs. Reconnecting with friends I'd neglected. Cooking my own meals. Things that used to be mundane now felt like reclaiming pieces of myself. Grief didn't vanish, it lingered like a shadow, but slowly, I could breathe without feeling like it was suffocating me. I also allowed myself to feel anger without guilt. To mourn without shame. To reflect without obsessing over her choices. Each day became less about what she did and more about what I could do to rebuild my life. And the clarity hit me: survival wasn't just about leaving her, it was about rediscovering who I was without her. For the first time in months, I started imagining a future that didn't include her, not as a cruel thought, but as freedom. And that realization was quietly powerful. Looking back, I've learned more than I ever wanted to about trust, honesty, and the fragility of comfort. Betrayal doesn't just break a relationship, it shakes your sense of self, makes you question your judgment, and forces you to face truths you'd never imagined. But I've also learned that healing is possible. You can feel every pang of loss, every rush of anger, every sleepless night, and still come out the other side stronger, clearer, and more grounded in what you deserve. I've learned to recognize red flags earlier, to trust my instincts, and to value my own boundaries above someone else's convenience. I'm not over it yet, and some days still sting more than others. But I know I'm moving forward, not clinging to what's gone. And if there's one thing I'd tell anyone going through this, it's this: don't settle for explanations that make you feel small. Don't let someone else's choices define your worth. Take your time. Protect yourself. And remember, you can rebuild, even when it feels impossible.